lock nuts with the nylon on the inside would never have worked. Next I'll install the inlet, and the outlet. These were advertised as 3/8. They could possibly be. There doesn't seem to be any light in between those threads. This one here is the 10mm, as I've demonstrated before. So that, you can see just there, that's a different thread. But the diameter does seem the same. I'll just focus that. So goes in roughly the same and seems, you know, pretty much like a perfect fit compared to the 3/8. This does seem a little bit wider. Okay, I'm going to use some thread sealant on this. This is thread tape. That's the thinner stuff. There's not much there, but that's the thinner stuff and it's white. And this is the thicker stuff, and it's pink. I'm not going to use this. There's a few reasons. I'll just show you how it's applied. So that you thread it in that way. So it wants to go that way. No, it wants to go that way. So you apply it a little bit back from the edge. The reason being is you don't want any of this to get into your fuel line, and you have to wrap it around the right way so that it doesn't unravel as you turn it in. But the manufacturers are saying don't use this, use this thread sealant. If this got into your carburetor, it would probably just as a side story, I did use this thread lock, but this is about 2 or 3 months old now, and you can see that it's still sticky. It hasn't gone off at all. I got that at Bunnings, and it only works when it's in a compressed state, say a piece of thread in a nut and it's tightened up. I've actually got to go and clean up my hands now because this stuff not good. So beware, go to an auto parts shop for your thread sealant. Okay, this won't go in very far, so I've never used this stuff before, so I'm just going to apply a little bit around the edge. Okay, so it's back from the very edge, and I'll just thread it in. Make sure it goes in the right hole. That's got to be my exit. That's the right one there. So it's got a nice bead around the edge there. I won't tighten it up too much. I just sort of like, I'll seat it. Okay, that's a really good seat just there. It's got a crush type thread. Probably not the right thread for it, but it should work. Okay, this L fitting, it's hard to tell whether it's going to do half a turn or 1.5 turns, but anyway, should be able to make it work. So I'm just going to coat those threads. Just trying not to get any on the inside. I want to shift it over to the outside threads there. That's a fair amount. I would like to work it over a bit there on that side. Okay. Oh, what have I picked up there? My God. Alright. Well, anyway, they do say that truth is stranger than fiction. So, anyway, carrying on. Try and get a start on it somehow, some way. There we go. Okay, that's a really good bead around the outside there. So let's see how much I can turn it. It's got to face up, and that's as far as it's going to go. It's just vertically up. Okay, that's it. Now, how does this go? I think, yeah, that's right. Lid on. I don't know how long it'll last now that it's got a hole in the top, but anyway, we'll see how it works. Okay, I'm just looking around for things to add to the video. That's the gasket that the fuel pump came with, and these two bolts. I don't know if the bolts will fit. They possibly may not. Okay, I'm going to end it here. Looks like we could get a storm. So, over and out. Okay, so it's now the 27th of the 1st, 2020. It's the next morning, and yep, we got a problem. I've come in to check my nice dry silicone, and that's right, it's as wet as when I put it on yesterday afternoon. So I've looked up on the internet, and apparently it's very confusing, different information. Some people say that it does go hard. Other people say that it's just a lubricant. They say you need to knead this bottle before application. Some people talk about a curing or a hardening agent. But it doesn't say anywhere here that it needs a hardening agent. Okay, that's what the tube says. Might be able to pause that if you've got the time to study it. And the packet. I don't think this is going to stand 10,000 psi somehow. It's only not much more than a liquid. I will pan down there, down the box the tube came in. This is another type of thread sealant. Got that at the biggest hardware outlet here in Australia. Just trying to get that to focus. It also didn't cure, and it trying to get that to focus. It left a sticky residue that I showed in this video. I'm going to try and get to the bottom of this problem. Just demonstrate once again what we're talking about. Okay. I'm putting this on the end of the video because I don't want to release any confusing or wrong information. What I'll do is I'll do a test here on these pieces of pipe. The important thing is that there's a thread there. It doesn't really matter what it is. This is plumbing pipe, this is copper, and this is a different type of material, so I'll apply this type to this and this type to this one here. Where the confusion may lay with this thread sealant is that it could only seal and dry in the thread, and anything outside of the thread could still become uncured. But anyway, let's do this simple test and get to the bottom of it. So I'll just apply around the edge there. They say that not much has to be used. Okay. So that's probably too much, but anyway, I'll thread that on. It's got the same bead coming out of the top there. Okay, we'll put that down there and I'll tighten that up. Okay, I'll put a bit of pressure on those threads. Okay, in the vise now. Okay, let's test one. Okay, the next test. Permatex. This does have a Canadian cancer warning on it. As an ex-resident of Toronto, okay, put a good amount of that around the sealant. Similar to the fuel pump. As I say, the directions did say that you did have to knead this. Okay, that must have sounded terrible. Okay, so kneading is when you just, that's kneading. If I put the cap on, so kneading is pushing in and around on the, just to mix up the contents inside, like a dough. That's kneading. Okay, so that's been kneaded, and I'll just put this on. Okay, that can't be tightened up. That's not a good test. Okay, that's a better test. So we've got a compression fitting here. I really don't understand this this cap system. This has got a hole in it, so you're supposed to put that one on, then this one, And of course once you use it, that's all messed up and you can't use it again, unless it's designed not to cure, not to go hard. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, well, that's it. That's the test, and we'll come back next week. Today is Monday, Australia Day, and we'll come back on probably Saturday. So that's roughly 5 days from now, and we'll pull them apart. If it's cured and hard and sealed on the inside of the thread, but not the outside, then we'll say that this stuff works. So until then. However, if it doesn't work, then what that means is essentially this stuff is nothing more than just a type of grease. I did do a test with silicon, and I've got a piece of silicon, and it was cured. I put it in a bowl of bowl of petrol or gasoline, and it was affected by the gasoline. So the gasoline will destroy silicon. Okay, it's now 2 days later, and let's go and put this in the vise and see what's happened. Okay, this is a thread sealant that goes hard, so that's good. The thread sealant outside of the thread trying to pick that up, as it's also cured. So in time on this, when it's in contact with metal, it is also cured, gone hard. So just trying to keep that on the video. Yep, that's a thread sealant. Okay, I'm beginning to see how this stuff works now. Okay, this is the other sort. Okay, that thread had been tightened. Let's have a look and see if the thread sealant has gone off. No, it's still in its liquid form. Okay. Let's have a look and see if it's gone hard around the threads. I don't think it's gone hard somehow. It's turning exceptionally easy. Okay, let's try and see. I don't think that's cured. Let's try that again. Okay, and as you see, it's nothing but a grease, type of grease. Okay, here's the other experiment. I did mock up another experiment here, and I wiped off the excess, and this will be the same. It'll just prove the same thing. Okay, so why would a business make a non-sealing thread sealant? There's a few reasons. First reason is that you can put your fuel pump together, put your thread sealant on it. Maybe a mechanic will put it straight onto a vehicle, start it up, and then this gets into the carburetor or fuel injection system, or carburetor in this case, and then he starts it up, and that clogs up all the jets in the carburetor. That could have happened. They could have got sued or in trouble, and so they've gone back to just making a grease. So in other words, what I'm trying to say is politics. Another thing is profit. So a business can make something that doesn't work on purpose, and what happens is they make a profit by, so you buy it and then you realise it doesn't work, and then you buy something else and it makes the industry money. So this is obviously false advertising. It's not a sealant. If it was a sealant, it would cure and go hard amongst the threads. This is the thread sealant that did work. I got it from a hardware store, but you would have to, I don't know, you'd have to do an experiment. I'm guessing you'd have to put it in the threads, you'd have to let it cure, then take expose the threads, take the nut off, and then put it in fuel and just see if it dissolves. Okay, this is a few notes I made a couple of days ago before this diagnosis. I'm thinking that this type of thread sealant was probably originally a hardening agent, so it went hard amongst the threads, and then possibly it turned into a type of grease so that you could reassemble unassemble and reassemble the threads if the work changed anywhere. But there and again, I mean, if you think about it, the outside thread could be, you could use a wire brush. But yeah, the inside thread, be hard to get out of that, and it'd probably push into the plumbing. This thread grease will dissolve with acetone, to a lesser degree with methylated spirits, and to a lesser degree again with fuel that you put in your car. Trying to focus that, so I'll be able to see that brush is now clean. But I've already decided what I'm going to do with these threads. So I'll clean that up. So I'm not using any paper towel for this, I'm using a rag. First of all, I'll wipe it. And I'll wipe this off, just making sure that I don't push it into the inlet there. And now I'll do the threads. Okay, it wants to be back from the edge because you don't want any of it getting inside the plumbing on this one, that's for sure. Okay, so that's now ready to okay, it might be a bit hard to believe for those who are outside of the industry, but this 454 was done up, you could say, a fair while ago, and it's actually still wet. If I get this in there, you can see, I'll just demonstrate, just get that focused a bit, and that's still wet. So okay, for whatever reason, that stuff's not supposed to cure at all. It's just supposed to be in between the threads. Okay, for a sealable thread seal, you can use something like this Loctite 577. That stands to reason because Loctite is a hardening compound or agent. I recommend looking up this video, Loctite 577, how to use, on Alan Hart channel. But remember, if you use this type of sealant, you won't be able to undo it. As in, if you undo it, the thread will be on the inside of the fuel pump, and it'll be hardened, so it'll be very hard to get off, and you may push some into the thread, so you'd want to be sure before you use that type of